everyone. Today we are looking at idioms you will hear in every office and business meeting.
Yeah, we are diving into a huge stack of business English glossaries, vocabulary lists, and idiom histories.
Exactly. And our mission for this deep dive is to give you a highly practical, career-oriented shortcut to mastering workplace jargon.
Right, because let's face it, corporate jargon often feels like, an exclusive secret code designed to confuse outsiders.
Oh, absolutely. It keeps people at a disadvantage. So we are not going to just read dictionary definitions to you today.
No, definitely not. We are strictly focusing on the logic, the stark imagery, and the actual mechanics of these phrases. No soft language, no hand-holding.
Because when you understand the literal physical reality these idioms come from, you essentially reverse engineer the jargon.
Right. You stop just memorizing phrases and start understanding the actual psychological weight they carry in a boardroom.
Which equips you to navigate those high-stakes meetings and, well, negotiate with absolute precision. So let's start at the foundation, earning money.
Yet the fundamental reason anyone steps onto a factory floor or logs into a remote terminal, it's survival.
It's the absolute baseline, and the most iconic representation of that in English business vocabulary is the phrase, to bring home the bacon.
Right. Which we all know means earning money to support a family or a household.
Yeah,
But the origin is what gives it that visceral impact.
exactly. The historical records trace it back to the early 20th century, specifically from rural fairground competitions.
The greased pig catching contest.
Yes. Yeah, I want to linger on this imagery because it is incredibly raw. You have a local country fair, right?
Right.
And the organizers release a pig into an enclosure, usually covered in grease, to make the animal, exceptionally difficult to grapple with.
Yeah, so the competitors are throwing themselves into the dirt, fighting the friction, fighting the animal, and fighting each other.
Just total chaos. And the winner, the one who actually physically subdues the pig, was literally handed a cut of bacon as their prize.
They physically carried sustenance back to their family. And the reason this phrase is still so common today, even in sleek corporate boardrooms, is because it solves a cognitive problem for us.
How so?
Well, modern compensation is totally abstract, right? It's merely digits shifting invisibly from a corporate payroll account to your personal checking account.
Ah, I see. The human brain struggles to feel a primal sense of satisfaction from a digital notification.
Exactly. So saying someone has to bring home the bacon grounds that abstract digital transfer in fundamental survival.
It frames a sterile task like, I don't know, finalizing a spreadsheet at 8 in the evening as a physical act of providing sustenance.
Right, but it also highlights the vulnerability of the worker. Because what happens when that compensation isn't quite enough?
Right. What happens when that survival metric is threatened?
That brings us to the structural tension of our next idiom, which is making ends meet.
Which is the absolute baseline of personal finance, just having enough funds to cover basic living expenses without a single dollar of surplus.
Yeah, and the sources trace this back to the 16th century as making both ends meet, visualizing a literal balancing act.
People usually picture pulling the two ends of a belt together, but I think that's a bit too simplistic.
Oh, really? How do you visualize it?
I prefer to look at it through the lens of structural engineering. Think of a bridge under construction spanning a deep ravine.
Okay, I like that.
One cantilevered side is your fixed income. The opposite side is your cost of living. To make ends meet is the high-stakes feat of getting those two massive structures to connect perfectly in the middle.
Right. But when macroeconomic pressures hit, like, say, a sudden spike in inflation, the ravine widens.
Exactly. The structural anchors are pulled further apart. You are suddenly dealing with immense tensile stress.
It requires massive constant pulling just to close that gap.
And if the ends don't touch, the structure fails. And to truly understand the weight of that tension, the sources contrast it with its polar opposite, the phrase money to burn.
Which means having such an extreme excess of cash that you could literally set it on fire without altering your standard of living.
It's the complete spectrum of financial physics. You either have the desperate tensile stress of pulling ends together, or the careless combustion of excess cash.
And as a professional, identifying where your colleagues or your clients sit on that specific spectrum will completely dictate your strategic approach to them.
It changes everything. So that tension of personal finance bleeds directly into how teams behave under pressure. Let's move from earning money to executing the work.
Right. Business process idioms.
Yeah.
And we have to start with the biggest hurdle in any corporate environment, which is inertia.
Getting the project started. So the phrase here is to get the ball rolling.
Yes. Its fundamental definition is to start an activity or a project to encourage others to join in and build momentum.
Knowing the definition is basic, sure, but deploying it as a psychological tool in a meeting is a masterclass in management.
Well, let's look at the physics of the metaphor. In physics, static friction, the force keeping an object at rest, is always stronger than kinetic friction.
The force resisting an object that's already moving?
Exactly. A heavy boulder sitting in the dirt requires massive, exhausting force to dislodge. But once it's rolling down a hill,
It only requires minor, effortless taps to steer it. And the human mind operates exactly the same way in group settings.
the bystander effect is essentially a form of static friction.
Right, so let's do a scenario. Say we put a team in a conference room on a Monday morning and give them a terrifyingly complex objective.
Like overhauling a global supply chain protocol.
Perfect. If you just stare at a blank whiteboard and ask who has an idea, the static friction is insurmountable. The fear of failure paralyzes the room.
No one wants to apply that initial force. So a skilled project lead absorbs that friction. They step in and say, we don't need a perfect strategy today. I've drafted a terrible preliminary timeline just to get the ball rolling.
Please open your files and let's tear it apart.
Right. The psychological shift there is brilliant. You completely remove the pressure of finality.
You give the team permission to interact with a moving object rather than demanding they construct it from scratch.
Exactly. However, once that object is in motion, that momentum can easily become reckless. Which brings us to a critical idiom regarding execution: cutting corners.
Okay, let me push back on this one, because I am looking at modern corporate culture, and we absolutely worship the concept of efficiency.
We do, yeah.
Every quarterly mandate is about lean workflows, agile methodology, doing more with less. In that context, can't cutting corners be spun as a positive thing?
I strongly advise any professional against attempting to spin that phrase.
Really, isn't it just a gritty way of describing efficiency?
No, it is a dangerous assumption. The business glossaries and reference texts are entirely unified on this. Cutting corners is universally a negative, high-liability phrase.
Wow, okay. Why is the line drawn so firmly there?
Because you have to look at the geometric reality of what a corner is. Think of a physical path, like a racetrack, that features a sharp, 90-degree turn.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
To be truly efficient is to navigate that complex turn with maximum speed, using superior skill and finely tuned equipment.
So you stay on the track, but you execute the turn perfectly.
Yes. To cut the corner, however, means you bypass the track entirely. You drive your vehicle over the grass, you damage the environment, and you risk destroying your vehicle just to save a fraction of a second.
Ah, I see.
The sources emphasize that in business, a corner, a procedural step, exists for a reason. It is almost always a safeguard for quality, compliance, or human safety.
So true efficiency is the elimination of waste, whereas cutting corners is the elimination of necessity.
That is the vital distinction. If you stand up in a project review and tell your boss that you cut a few corners to finish early,
You're not bragging about your speed.
no, you are openly confessing to negligence. You're admitting that you delivered a substandard product and introduced liability into the organization.
So if a competitor accuses your department of cutting corners, that's an accusation of malpractice. You have to aggressively defend against that phrase.
Exactly. Never claim it. So assuming your project is rolling smoothly and you aren't bypassing any crucial steps, the conversation logically shifts to how we measure success.
Numbers and strategy. This is where careers are cemented. Understanding how to deploy financial terminology during a negotiation is a non-negotiable skill.
Right. So let's look at a phrase used in almost every forecasting meeting or initial client pitch: a ballpark figure.
Which means an approximate estimate. But understanding why we use the word ballpark instead of simply saying rough guess reveals its actual strategic value.
It comes down to the psychology of anchoring in behavioral economics. In any high-stakes negotiation, the first number spoken aloud exerts a massive gravitational pull.
Oh, totally. If a client asks how much a software integration will cost, and you give a highly specific exact number, like $42,500, you've planted a flag.
And if the reality comes in at $60,000, you have failed and destroyed your credibility.
But conversely, if you shrug and say, I don't know, you project total incompetence.
Right, so the ballpark figure is your tactical middle ground. It is an essential defensive shield.
By using the word ballpark, you are invoking spatial boundaries. You are telling the client, a ballpark figure for this scale is between $50,000 and $70,000.
You've established the order of magnitude. You determine whether we are playing in a $10,000 stadium or a $1 million stadium.
You set the boundaries of the playing field, the ballpark, without legally committing to a single specific blade of grass on that field.
It protects your liability while safely advancing the negotiation. You discover instantly if the client even has the budget to buy a ticket to your stadium.
If they were expecting to pay $5,000, you immediately know you are in the wrong ballpark.
And you can end the negotiation without wasting your team's time.
It's brilliant for managing expectations. And speaking of financial boundaries, we must arrive at the ultimate binary in business. At the end of the quarter, you are either in the red or in the black.
In the black indicates a profitable solvent state. In the red indicates crisis, the company is carrying debt, taking a loss, or overdrawn.
But I want to go back to a question I posed earlier. Why red? Why does a digital app on a smartphone rely on that specific color to trigger financial anxiety?
This is where the historical origin is truly profound. It's not just a random cultural association. It is a literal, mechanical description of pre-computer accounting practices.
Back when accountants managed global empires using heavy, physical paper ledgers.
Exactly. They recorded every transaction by hand. To quickly parse this visual data, they relied on different colored inks. Income and profits were recorded with standard black ink.
But when a devastating loss occurred,
The accountant physically put down the black pen. They reached across their desk, took a different pen, and dipped it into a well of red ink. So an executive reviewing a struggling company would open that ledger, and the physical pages would be overwhelmingly dominated by red ink. They were quite literally in the red.
that phenomenon absolutely fascinates me. The immense persistence of this physical action. We digitized the entire global economy. We eliminated paper ledgers and inkwells.
But the visual language survived intact.
It goes beyond language. It triggers a physiological response. If your retirement fund drops today, the font turns red. The physical act of dipping a pen into a specific glass bottle 200 years ago is still causing day traders' heart rates to spike today.
We operate in a digital workspace, yet we are entirely bound by the physical ghosts of the past.
The corporate vocabulary you use in your daily meetings is literally haunted by history. Which brings us to one final thought to mull over, the phrase, foot the bill.
Meaning to pay for something, like the company will foot the bill for a dinner.
Right. But logically, what does a foot have to do with settling a financial transaction?
You have to return to that physical accounting ledger. Picture a 17th century merchant reviewing an itemized list of expenses. To calculate the final amount, they run their finger down the column of numbers to the very bottom edge of the paper.
And historically, the bottom of a document was referred to as the foot.
Precisely. So to foot, the bill simply meant to calculate that total at the bottom of the ledger. By verifying that number at the foot, you inherently took responsibility for paying it.
The cipher strikes again. The abstract phrase is just a ghost of a physical action.
So the next time you enter a salary negotiation or a boardroom, listen closely for those historical ghosts in your colleagues' vocabulary. Are they grappling with a pig in the dirt? Are they trying to build a bridge between two ends?
Are they reaching for the red inkwell? Mastering this imagery means mastering the psychology of the room.
If you want to improve your business English, please subscribe to our channel.
Yes, and please hit the like button and click the bell icon to support the podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
See you in the next episode. Goodbye.